I think he should have gone home with the two blondes.
You would have.
Yeah, I mean that's the advice I would give, and yeah, that's the advice I would follow if I was him.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
I
finally
Watched.
I
finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon. And I finally watched Blast from the Past.
So this is the 25th anniversary of Blast from the Past, which is a movie that I feel like, Brendan Fraser had there's probably like a retrospective of his career, like online and stuff when The Whale was happening, when people are like, he deserves this. And I feel like this is kind of not at the top of the list for movies people talked about. Like,
It would be, what would it be? It would be The Mummy. Obviously, I think I'd like to put George of the Jungle up there, personally.
Dazzled, Airheads, Encino Man.
I did Encino Man on a different podcast. I was a guest for a different podcast.
Wasn't I supposed to be on that? And I
You were
just I don't think I was like, I can't watch the movie in time. You just have to do it without me.
Yeah, you didn't have time. Your kids were running rampant or something like
That
that.
makes sense.
But I loved it so much because I did it with a couple of gents from over the pond, and I remember it's like, oh, let's do Encino Man. It's like, that's not what we call it. I'm like, what do you guys call it? They're like, we just call it California Man. They're like, we don't know where the fuck Encino is. I was like, honestly, nor do I.
I don't think I know that Encino is in California, like near the LA area.
Yeah.
I never put two and two together that that's what Encino was. Because it almost sounds prehistoric.
Right. I think that's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I never thought of it as like, oh yeah, that's actually really funny, and obviously then makes sense why. We're not doing that movie. We're doing Blast from the Past. This is one that I watched quite a bit when I was younger, when it came out. And the other day, I asked my wife if she wanted to watch it, and then our oldest, who's like almost 5, won't go to bed at night, so like watching a movie together is actually pretty difficult because like by the time we finally get him to shut up and like stay in his bed, I'm tired. So I was like, oh, maybe we can watch it with the kids. I was like, I think it's like PG, and then I look, it's PG-13, but watching it today, I don't know what, like anything that, first of all, I don't think they would have enjoyed the movie, but also
It's a lot of talking for a 5-year-old in that movie. And it
yeah,
might be
not a lot of cool stuff to look at.
Right. It might be the "Oh my lucky stars, a Negro" line.
I don't even think you could say that.
I can say that.
I don't think so.
I can say that.
Well, if I'm gonna tell you, you know what? I'm gonna tell you to cut it, and if it's still in there, then this is still in there as well. Now I think there's the adult bookstore part of it. There's the
Oh yeah, and that doesn't make sense to me either.
Getting him laid,
Getting him
things
laid,
like that.
That's true.
So I mean, there is some stuff, but honestly, I think all of that, along with the rest of the movie, would have gone over his head. This movie feels like now like a PG movie. I don't even think there's cursing. Like maybe what shit? I think they say shit twice.
No, they said quite a bit actually.
Do they? Nah, either way.
Yeah, because she's explaining to him that it's French, right? So they say like twice there, and then Alicia Silverstone says it once, and then when they first meet, because he's like, parlez-vous français, mademoiselle? And then I think Sophie says it in the bar club scene, right? Yeah. So that's like 4 times.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't appropriate for a kid who I don't want him to learn curse words. Anyway, this is a kind of a very like throwback movie, like a movie that like the tone of it is kind of, it's Pleasantville, like it's just like feel good, but like I don't know, it's just like movies don't kind of feel like this anymore, not good ones. Right. And although this wasn't critically, this was kind of so at the time, but I was like, this is really good. And I'll let you talk in a second when I decide I'm done. But I actually fucking choked up at the end of this movie, which is so stupid.
No, Ed, that's how I felt too. Actually, I choke up at everything. What am I talking about? We watched the new Haunted Mansion from Disney
Oh my god.
last night, and I choked up at that at the end. It's about grief, man, when you really look into it. The thing about this movie is that I could first I thought it was going to be way sillier than it actually ended up being.
Right.
Because I'm thinking Brendan Fraser. I'm thinking like an Encino Man. I'm thinking, of course, this doesn't have Pauly Shore in it, but I'm thinking, really just an all-out comedy.
Have you seen Biodome?
I've seen Biodome, yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, I know. But I thought what was going to be like a Biodome Encino Man situation ended up being a really, really heartfelt movie that I think the pacing, like, for example, if this movie was made today, the whole precursor to them, how they end up in the fallout shelter, to him growing up, would have been maybe like 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops. And then the rest of it would have been the antics of him being out of place in the modern world. And I think it did take a little bit to get there, because once it got there, I think it really like started rolling from there. But I think you have to have all that set up, because all the payoff throughout and at the end, it like with the bearer bonds and everything like that, is really good.
Well, and it's the other thing that the beginning does, and I'll let you get back to it, is you were talking about how you expected like an Encino Man, kind of like a slapstick, sort of like that the comedy would come from slapstick. But what really happens is the entire beginning of this is exposition for the comedy. Everything that's done in the bomb shelter is to set up all the jokes for basically the rest of the movie.
And in that way, it's like perfect, right? And also, Christopher Walken and Sissy Spacek being the mother and father of Brendan Fraser is kind of just the most perfect casting.
Yeah, my favorite part of this was Dave Foley. It says David on IMDb, but he goes by Dave Foley, who plays Troy, the gay friend.
Oh yeah.
Like, he's my favorite part in this. Like, he's kind of my favorite part in like everything he does, because I
absolutely lost it when I saw Nathan Fillion in this. Yeah. I was like, no way. And he, oh man, that scene, we'll talk about it when we get there, at the nightclub, is so great. It's one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen.
It is.
And so all this setup, but okay, so let's start talking about the beginning. So we're introduced to Christopher Walken and Sissy Spacek as she's pregnant, right? And I did not think that this would start out with him being pre-born, but I was like, oh, I see it. I see the vision of them getting trapped in. I knew that they were going to get trapped in the fallout shelter under false pretense of a war. I knew that.
Yeah.
I thought it was actually much dumber than the airplane crashing into their house. And so I was glad it was something that big, because it made sense, because they could think like, oh, they were annihilated, right? That's why no one's looking for them.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of stuff that happens in the first like 40 minutes of the film, from showing him growing up, but also showing the neighborhood change around them. I thought was so good. And the focus on the mother-son who own like the bar, the milkshake shack, the bar, to like being like in the 90s and everything is gray and desolate. I love, and I'll say this and I'll let you talk, but I love the aspect of you follow up from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And then at the last like date, it doesn't say what year it is. It just says present day. And when Christopher Walken first comes out of there is nothing that happens in his like first walk out of there that you couldn't say this is in 2024.
Right. No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, it's kind of perfect a little bit in that way, that it's and sort of throughout, like, it definitely feels very 90s after that, but like not too much. I do like that they basically are like modern day LA is a hellhole. It's like kind of the point of the movie.
It's a nuclear apocalyptic wasteland, and there's no different. One of the best jokes is that you very like quickly you're told that there was an earthquake that happened in LA kind of like a few years ago, or like a year ago. And then later on, Brendan Fraser mentions how much he loves The Highway. And then Troy says, yeah, they only built that in 6 months after the disaster. He's talking about the earthquake, right?
Yep.
But he thinks he's talking about the nuclear fallout in the 50s. He's
Yeah.
like, my Lord, that was fast.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I want to talk about in the very beginning. So the music over the atomic war footage, I think, is really great. It's kind of a thing that you see a lot in movies now, that we've seen a lot over time, like this sort of like, and it's like not anachronistic, but just sort of, it doesn't really, maybe it is. It's like it doesn't fit with like what you're trying to show. Like you have this like bubbly like 40s music playing over like the end of the world, basically.
But you know what does that right now? That's like brand new and that's out right now is the new Fallout video game series.
Well, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Stranger Things did that a little bit with like playing some of the music.
But even like trailers do that a lot. You have a trailer of a certain thing. Like right now, it's like it's so common. People make fun of it, right? It's that the trailer of like a new horror movie, but then you pick a pop song and sing it slowly over it.
I think Jeepers Creepers did that too. I think they played like the Jeepers Creepers song. Like the only part I've seen of that movie is the very end that reveals the fate of Justin Long.
Right.
So then it plays like a song like that. I think it's Jeepers Creepers. So we get like all this set up that he's like this rich guy who's a professor. It's like exposition 101, like in the 90s, like they're just like, fuck it, we're just going to tell you what the movie's about with like, and have all these people at a party that are like, he used to be a professor.
Gossiping about his exposition.
Money. Now he's rich. And it's like, who are all these fucking people that don't know this yet?
He's an inventor. And then I love his character introduction. He's like, so then the duck said, put it on my bill.
And then the guy's like, fucking idiot. Like, because he does that same joke 35 years later to his son.
Yeah.
Which is funny because they say, have you heard, the setup of it, he's like, have you heard this joke? And he's like, a duck walks in the office, and this is like cuts. Like, so you don't, like, because it's going to happen. They get the Kennedy comes on talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he kicks everyone out and immediately is going down to a shelter, and he thinks, oh, just for a couple days. And I always remember this movie being that the plane took out the entire house so that if they weren't in that shelter, it would have killed them.
Mm-hmm.
But this time it sort of seemed like it just took out the back part. Like it didn't take out the house, it took out the shed.
It took out the entire house. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is kind of an aspect of this where it's like, oh, if he hadn't have been crazy, they would have all died.
Like all of his friends and neighbors. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
His friends and neighbors, but his wife and his unborn son. Like
of course. Yeah, but they would have all died too, right? And I like another aspect that they were like, oh, he gets so uppity about politics and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then he, there's something about Christopher Walken being Christopher Walken, playing a character that's just Christopher Walken, but he's almost justified in his thinking for over 35 years. He's justified into being this crazy about it.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, he was proved right, even though he wasn't, right? But to him and his wife, he was proved right. I love the police afterwards. He's like, yeah, apparently he would just be out here all hours of the night, and his wife would bring him hot Dr. Pepper. He drank it hot? Good Lord. I mean, like they were discovering a mangled body. And then we sort of just get montages, which go on for a while, but it's setting up all of like the jokes. It's setting up he knows how to dance. It's setting up he knows how to fight.
The baseball cards, the stock,
all these facts.
The bearer bonds, yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's sort of interesting. You were talking about this, but I feel like too, a movie like this, there's a lot of movies like this now where you have like someone put in sort of an isolation situation. It's sort of an interesting thing to watch. Like you could have almost made that part longer. You know what I mean? Like,
I see. Yeah.
Or you could have had it really short, which is what you talked about. And I think for this movie, it is kind of perfect because the story that is being told is like, it's a romance, right? It's a rom-com essentially. So,
right.
Like having it this length and having like an hour 10 after that for the rest of it, I think is kind of perfect.
Well, even though the first part feels long, none of the middle seems very rushed, which I found interesting. At least I thought I didn't feel rushed. Maybe the ending? a little bit. I don't know, but it felt like pretty well paced to me. Except for the beginning, felt a little dragged down. And then, like you were saying, this is initially a rom-com, but it takes forever to get to the rom part of it.
Yeah. So it's his birthday. There's 2 years left. He's 33, and I love the explaining baseball. And he's like, it's a force, which honestly, it'd be like someone explaining baseball to you right now. But why does he run to second? Because he must. But why? And the payoff for that is great. And then he just wants to. He wishes that he could find a girl.
He's like, and then there's a picture like the one Mom has.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of perfect. So we go to the present day. The lock's free. It's been 35 years, and the dad goes up, and he goes outside, and he runs into first someone throwing up, a drunk being thrown outside, a prostitute, guys who pull a gun on him and pretend to shoot him.
But then it's just a water gun.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, but okay.
So, and then what I do find is funny is like when Alicia Silverstone at the end of the movie is driving on that same block, all those same people are there again. Like from the guys with the fake gun to the prostitute to the exact same person being thrown out to the person throwing up. It's like that block is like the Truman Show. Like it just keeps repeating like the same events every night. He goes up, and like you said, we were talking about all the stuff of the son and the mom that own the bar upstairs that used to be the milkshake shop is fucking hilarious. Like just that kept going, and then like the payoff in the end. But when he goes up there and he's like, "Stay away from my elevator," and how that becomes a religion. It's just so funny.
I love it too because it's like, "Who are you?" And they're like, "I'm the father." He's like, "The father," and then he comes up, and Brendan Fraser comes up. He's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm the son." Of course, the son. And then when Sissy Spacek comes up there, they're like, "Who are you?" She's like, "I'm the mother." They're like, "The mother."
I love the presentation of her too. I forget. Yeah, I think it was her where she just sees the guy up there, and like she's like, "I'm the mother," and then you see all the other patrons like stand up because you think it's just that guy, but it's like no, he's converted people.
It's like a church now.
Yeah. So the dad goes up, completely scared, comes back down, wants to shut everything down for years, and then he fakes a heart attack, basically.
They're mutants. They're sexual interchangeable. I don't understand it.
I do find it interesting that like the movie is dealing with, the interactions of someone from the late 60s,
the 50s, 60s,
yeah, 50s and 60s to a trans prostitute to a gay guy, and I think that it's playing with the idea of them not being used to that, but also at the same time it's done in a way that like it doesn't like when you watch it now you're not like, oh, that's fucking that did not age well. You know what I mean? Like it kind of aged fine, like the way they handled it. Like they had jokes about it, but they weren't like overly offensive.
No, it wasn't overly offensive. And I think
as a white straight guy.
As a white straight guy, I didn't find anything wrong with this. But the description of the transgendered prostitute, I turned to Taylor and I was like, see, it is 2024. It's perfect. No, but even when a lot of the stuff about Troy, when he first tells Adam that Adam's Brendan Fraser's character, for those who haven't seen the movie, and tells Adam that he's gay, or Alicia Silverstone tells him that Troy is gay, he turns to him and he's like, huh, good for you. And you're like, well, that's kind of the reaction like like one of our parents would maybe have to like being told that this person's gay, right? But then at the end you find out that he just thought it meant happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like everything just falls really perfectly with like his upbringing, and then he's so polite and gentlemanly that there is no room for him to be insensitive.
Correct. Like even it might something might confuse him, but he's not going to be like I don't like this.
A penis about it. Right.
So the wife decides to send the son to go get groceries and medicine and liquor. And if you can, find a girl and bring her back down here. Hopefully she is not a mutant. She's from Pasadena.
A mutant?
And so then he goes up, and this is when he goes in. He meets the Soda Jerk is the guy's name in the cast listing.
Okay.
Um, and he's like, the guy's like, "Can you forgive me for my life?" And he's like, "Yeah, all this decay is over." It's just like funny the way like it's obviously the way it's written is to have like him say something that doesn't really like they're talking past each other, but they think they're communicating just fine.
Correct.
And so then he goes to the grocery store, realizes that like the price of things have gotten really expensive, and then
that was like a really cool detail about the movie was that they didn't take in account for inflation.
Yeah. Which still like how much meat he was gonna buy, and it was only $500. I was like, holy shit. That's like still cheap to me now. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well,
and then like that Mickey Mantle card, I think I read somewhere like a Mickey Mantle card sold for like $150,000 in 2015. So his like $6,000 card would be worth probably a lot more. So and then he realizes that he doesn't know where his home is anymore.
How to get back to the
he didn't drop
shelter.
breadcrumbs or anything. And so he's riding the bus around, sees a porn shop, and for some reason, Alicia Silverstone works in a baseball card shop or a card shop, a memorabilia dealer. But she also has a heart of gold, and she steps in when her boss is going to buy all of his cards, probably worth close to $100,000 or hundreds of thousands for $500, and she gets fired over it.
Yeah. First of all, I totally get it. from the boss's perspective.
Oh yeah,
God, I'd be pissed.
Yeah, you got fire. Yeah, I mean, the dude comes in to sell something. You make an offer. He can. I mean, especially now, like he could just like you make him an offer and he can like, oh, I looked it up. It says this is worth this much.
Yeah.
But she saves him, and then she takes him to the hotel after.
Well, hold on. So before she takes him to the hotel, he keeps repeating himself, like his name. He's like, my name's Adam Weber, and blah 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 blah. Nice to meet you. And she calls him Heathcliff, which I think is so funny. But he reiterates that his name is Adam. So then the card shop owner is like, Adam and Eve, perfect couple. Get out of here, right? And so now her name is Eve, and you're like, oh, of course it is.
Yeah, which is a little like too cute. But she gets a little scared of him because he's like, well, don't worry, I don't have a gun. And then he offers her what I think her character is written fairly well is that you have at first she accepts this $4,000 card to just drive him, but then after he's at the hotel for a little bit, she comes back because she's like, I can't do that to you. Like, I'm not that type. I can't get mad at my boss and then accept this, even though in reality she told him like, hey, this is worth $4,000. Before like, kind of giving him an out, she still like can't accept it.
Right.
And all his interactions at the hotel are very funny. She's like, I need a card, and he's like, oh, of course. Like pulls out a baseball card.
But then it just cuts to him going to the room. I was like, how did he pay for that? I don't get it.
Maybe they accepted cash, and then or she's like into baseball too, and then the my father always told me to tip, and the guy's like, well, your father sounds like a smart guy. He's like, my father was a genius. Like gets mad that he just says smart.
And then he only has like $100 bill, right?
Yeah, I think he gives him like two of them. And she comes to return the card. He like comes down. He's so happy. She's like, listen, I know you like me, because like I can see the way you're looking at me, and just and I'm into the issue. Like, but I'm into shallow guys, and I got this and that. And he's like, well, I'm into your eyes. And she's like, oh, an eye guy, great.
Another really funny joke is that he's so sexually repressed, right? But he's really polite about it.
Yeah.
He says something like, oh, to his mom, I think, I've been waiting, I want a wife. She's like, how long have you had these feelings? He's like, oh, not long. Just the past 15 years.
But he basically hires her, and she says $1,000 a week, and he's like, okay. Like at first he's like, I don't know about that, but really he was like always gonna accept. And I'm like, $1,000 a week, so like that's a $52,000 a year job. 50,000 with if you take a couple weeks vacation. So like I feel like she could have gotten a little bit more.
But it's the 90s. It's the 90s.
but also she's going to be doing like she's working for him like all hours of the day. You know what I mean? Like from sun at 8 a.m. until like the sun goes down.
Yeah, but it's the '90s.
Long days. And so there's like a montage of them getting food, and he's like, Eve, I would be lost without you. She's like, listen, don't say it. You know, she once again is telling him, I'm not interested in you. He's like, okay, well then I need you to find me a girlfriend. And what I think is very interesting is the way that and it's because of the way this character is established, is that he doesn't like get upset or, get mad at her for her turning him down. He just moves on, which in turn like works out for him and getting her, because then she's like, oh, why did
he's not like the other guys.
he's different.
He's different. Those old-fashioned values. Yeah, actually, a part of that montage I love is that she's like in the background while they're all loading food from like Costco and these like Whole Food marts and wholesale marts. That's what I'm trying to say. And the guy who's like, who is this guy? And she's like, arms crossed, sunglasses on. She's like, I don't know, I just work for the guy. Like she's his fucking broker. Like, I don't know, there's something really funny about that.
Well, I mean, she's like, I don't need to ask questions because this guy is, obviously he's paying me. So we then, after that, meet Cliff, Nathan Fillion, who it's like had the funny line of like, why is he wearing another man's underwear, talking about Ralph Lauren, which is also funny because he's like, oh, I have a question. She's like, yes, I'm still into him and he's one of the guys, and da-da-da. He's like, well, no, I'm just gonna ask about the underwear. But then we meet Dave Foley, who is once again my favorite part of this, and I love the she's psychic thing, and like gives her a hand and all the Alaska stuff, and he starts asking him questions, which even if you live in Alaska, doesn't mean you necessarily know the answer to those things. That's what I thought
too. It's actually more like you have a better chance of not knowing anything if you live in a place, because you have no reason to learn about it.
I don't think you have state facts. I mean, maybe Alaska, because it's like out there by itself.
And I just want to say that I know that Juneau is the capital of Alaska, and Anchorage is the largest city. Okay.
Good for you. Good for you, Alon. And then like he's got a computer. He's like, in the house? It's like, yeah, in the house.
Excuse me for one moment.
And then we get it's the mother coming up, and then Adam's makeover after that, where he's been basically Queer Eye for a Straight Guide.
Yeah. What does he have? He has a better haircut, and he has a leather jacket now.
That hair, like, I was thinking about this I was like, the Mummy, Brendan Fraser, is the hair like he always needed to have.
Right.
He looked the best with that. These both came out in 1999 too, so I don't know, like, did he cut his hair for this?
It almost seemed like they put something in his hair to make it darker and thicker, like he was already thinning out at that point. But like if that came out during The Mummy, I don't remember him having thinned out hair in The Mummy, unless that was like a piece.
It's fucking great locks in The Mummy. Yeah, maybe it was, I don't know. Anyway, he should have stuck with that. And then he just walks into the ocean after seeing it. He has like the hot chicks who smile at him in the bikinis because of his new makeover, I guess. And then he just walks into the ocean. And also the gay baseball scene right afterwards is hilarious. And he's like, I finally get it. Because they must.
Yeah.
And the next scene is a pretty great one. It is when they go to the club. He's like out in the rain, and she's like, do you still want me to find a wife? He says, yes. And what's really funny is she's like, you want me to find your wife? He's like, yeah, I'll give you all of my baseball cards. She's like, what am I, your pimp? And he's like, no, you're my best friend. And you can tell she's like, I don't like you saying best friend.
I think the showing of her becoming more and more jealous is really well done. Yep. Because from the get-go, where she has absolutely no interest in him to where she's like almost creeped out by him, transitioning to like her just getting to know him better and better and better. And Troy is making out to be like the best wingman ever anyone could ever have.
He's a great guy, that Troy.
And I'm so glad you're happy. Happy. And then Alicia Silverstone, gay. I just love that line delivery. Um, but anyway, so she's just slowly falling more and more into him, and I think that's just shown really well.
So they go to Club 40s, which is like, if you're kind of paying attention, you know how well that's gonna do for him, right? Because his parents, that's like their time, and so they've taught him like the dances and and stuff. And he runs into Sophie, and says shit in the French thing, and I love as she takes him away. Troy to Sophie's like, "So do you have to check those or those carry-ons?"
I also like it too, where it's like Nathan Fillion's character calls her a bitch, and he doesn't quite get because he doesn't know cursing, right? So he doesn't know the terminology. And then she calls Sophie a bitch, and he goes, well, I don't understand why everyone's like calling you a bitch, her a bitch. Like, I don't get it. And Troy's just getting the biggest kick out of it.
Uh-huh. I think he should have gone home with the two blondes.
You would have.
Yeah, I mean, that's the advice I would give, and yeah, that's the advice I would follow if I was.
Although I do love how he is taken away from them by Alicia, and then he goes back, and they're already schmoozing up some other like fancy rich guy.
Oh yeah, I mean they're there for a purpose. That I can't find my Congressional Medal of Honor. I mean, that's high class lady that like thinks that joke is funny. You know what I mean? That she gets that. She, if she was stupid, she'd be like, "What is that?"
Well, it's really funny because he goes in there's like, be yourself, and she's like, oh, that works for no one. And then
except him,
and then he's told to lie and be fine. And he takes all of that, he takes all of those notes and just is just super smooth about it. And it also helps that he knows how to dance, you know?
Yeah, I do think that. So after this, we get the punches Cliff scene, which is very funny and like one that you almost want, because you're like, this guy had all the time in the world to learn self-defense. His dad would have taught him that, as like his dad who was like worried about the Russians invading, and you know what I mean, like,
and you see them boxing too.
Yeah, so that part is like you're just waiting for it. And then she leaves and Troy comes home.
He's just like, I'm sorry. He's like, she's like, Adam. He's like, he keeps coming at me. Like,
he does it the third time. He's like, all right.
And then Cliff is like, maybe we should take this outside. And another punch. He's like, maybe we should just go home.
So Troy comes home and she's like, oh no, he didn't go home with the two blondes. He went home with Sophie.
Sophie. Yeah, I also love how we need absolutely no exposition about their relationship. We just know that they have a thing.
And the woman who, it's such a small part, but the woman who does Sophie acts so much like a Sophie. You know what I mean? Like she acts like the character that Alicia Silverstone should hate.
Yeah.
In that scene, and a lot of that's just what's projected on from Troy and
Of
Eve.
course. And then
with a small part, she's doing a great job with it.
You can also tell there's a lot of like self-confident issues with Eve's character. Like, he comes at Sophie speaking French, and she matches him in that, like, in the language part of it, which Alicia Silverstone's character can't do, right? And so she feels inferior to her, which topples over. It's like, oh, maybe they have like a high school fallout or something. I mean, yeah, I just love how they just were like, this is it. And you're just, as the audience, you're just going to accept it. And we were just like, yep.
Sophie, played by Carmen Moret, who I don't recognize anything else she's been in. She's in The First Wives Club, which was also directed by the same guy. So there you go. But she did great in this. So then she's about to drive over to Sophie's to stop them from having sex.
Yeah.
Only for him to just show up right then.
Dude, the way she fucking cartwheel barrel rolls out of that car, so great.
And then this part is a little interesting where Brendan Fraser has just in an instant become the most suavest, cool guy. Like, Troy says this thing to him like, hey, you're a nice boy, she needs a nice man. And then he like takes her over there and he's like, quit acting like a baby. And then like blows on her knee and then goes in for a huge kiss. Like, where did he learn all those moves?
He just needed to be told by Troy to be a man.
Or just to dance with those hot blondes. That was all the confidence in the world he needed. Um, and then she's like, "How have you not had sex?" And then this is a thing he's been trying to tell her for a few hours now, and he just breaks it down about the bomb shelter, which is one thing. But then, Eve, I would like to take you to the fallout shelter. I was told if I found a healthy young girl, I should bring her down, and you look pretty healthy to me. Word choice, Adam. Like, do better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like all the suaveness just went out the window in that one line. But I
And
love his naivety about it. He's like, there's nothing wrong with what I'm saying.
right. And then this sort of starts basically the end of the movie, which this part is like from that to the end is kind of a fairly abrupt, sort of events. It's like they're driving to get the meat, and then they see the adult bookstore, so he's found home. He goes to Eve, and she's basically like trying to get him Baker acted.
I was not a fan of this part. I felt like this part with the psychiatrist was a little clunky.
It makes logical sense though to me that she's like, I care about this guy, and he is saying something that is obviously insane,
Right.
and it's worrying me. And then when the psychiatrist's like, I'm gonna call the cops, she's like, well, I don't want that. I don't want anything bad to happen to them. And then I think it also gives her time to process, and that happens more and more when they go to the hotel room where she's like, oh, is he telling the truth? You know what I mean? And then so after Adam escapes, and he's the way he's like goes to his parents, and he's like, there's a psychiatrist after me, and the church guy's like, yeah, it happens. And he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, this church guy and all of his friends are really gonna help us like get all this food down here.
That was also a funny thing too. With the escape from the psychiatrist, he's being chased by her like enforcer, and she's like, well, what happened? He's like, I tripped.
He's like, I fell.
I fell. And then when Troy basically single-handedly saves this scene for me, when he repeats back to the psychiatrist like, hey, we don't want to get this to get out of hand, right? From what she said to him or to Eve a while back. And then they're like fighting. They're like, she jumps him, right? She like jumps down his throat and she has to be held back. I that whole thing is so funny to me.
So they go to the hotel, they find the baseball cards, they find the toothpaste that's from like 1961, and then they find the stock certificates. One thing that I read is funny is there was like IBM and AT&T, and then Polaroid was one. And it was like the thing says IBM and AT&T would obviously be worth millions. But it said that the stock price of Polaroid in 1962 was $22, and in 1999 it was also $22, and that they went bankrupt in 2001. So it's like that would have been worth nothing, like extra, like it just would have
really
been whatever
funny.
The purchase was.
Really funny.
So after this, they start driving around. I do love the lines from Troy where he's like, the best guy in the world walks into your life and you try to have him committed.
Yes, that's the other line that's just awesome.
And she's like, well, at least I fell in love with him before I found out he was rich.
I just want to say, did that scene with the bear bonds remind you of that scene in Forrest Gump where he's like, and then I just invested in a fruit company?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit just like, oh, this fortuitous thing. But it also, once again, it also makes sense. Like, it's interesting, though, that those baseball cards and the stock certificates would have been brought down. I guess there's probably a scene where they, like, grab it and run down there. But, like, the fact that would be downstairs instead of just in the house, I guess maybe the dad had the forethought to know that this shit would be valuable later on. But, who knows?
Yeah, I guess. But then I get that was a contingency plan if the quote unquote nuclear fallout never happened. But since it happened, like he said, they would have been useless.
Exactly. I like when she's like, "What did you guys do today?" And he's like, "Oh, well, oh yeah, we Adam went into a porn shop." And you're like, "Adam was excited to see porn?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, very excited." And you're like, maybe it was buried under the dirty bookstore.
I did want to mention when they go to the bookstore, when they go to the adult XXX bookstore, there's a shot of them coming in and like a kind of a wide shot, and you see all the DVD covers of the various pornos.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one that they had to blur out. First of all, I don't understand. I guess you're just blurring it out because,
They
Well,
wanted to keep the PG-13 rating.
PG-13 rating. There's a reverse shot where it shows a ton of the porn titles blurred out. But in that initial shot, it only showed one blurred out. And I was like, if they knew that they could not show tits, why wouldn't they just move that one cover so that the guy who has to mat it in, who has to go into editing and paint it out, doesn't have to do that? But I don't know. That bothered me.
It might have been a thing that they thought about after the fact, and they're like, "Oh, just fucking blur it." That is such an odd thing for a movie released in theaters with no like, to just be like, "Ah, fuck it, we'll just blur it out."
Yeah.
I mean, why don't you just like, I don't know, put something else over it? If you can blur it out, you could also just put a different image on it.
That's exactly my point.
It would be less noticeable. The
It's
funny
almost
thing
like
is,
it's almost
I
like they
never
shot.
noticed it.
It's all. I have more of an eagle eye than you.
Mhm.
It's almost like they shot in a real porno store instead of like building a set. That's how it felt like to me.
And that guy was the real porno owner.
That guy was the real porno. He looked like it.
So she starts leaving. They drive by. It's like I said, it's the same exact events that happened when the father surfaced, a few days ago. And then he brings her down to meet the parents because she sees him. They have like the moment in the rain where they jump and she jumps in his arms and they kiss. And then he takes her down there. And I love, this is the first time you hear this, and it's like planting this joke for the very end of the movie, but he's like, this is Eve Rustikoff. And you're like, oh, what's that name? And he tells them like, hey, set the locks for 2 months. We'll be back. And the part where I choked up when he's like, if you're just going to have to trust me. You know what I mean? He's like, if you believe me or whatever. And I was like, holy fuck shit, man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Do that to me.
I also love the part where she's introduced to his mom and she leans into him and she leaned into her and she goes, I'm from Pasadena.
Yeah. She's just like, I'm trying to get in with this mom. Well, too, it's like it hasn't established they're dating, but the mom's like, are you two seeing each other? And she's like, yeah, we are. But then the dad tells the bad jokes. He's making the drinks. They're like having dinner. That's like a nice little cool scene.
Yeah.
I love cut to after this when Alicia Silverstone like basically becomes the narrator of this. And
did you find that kind of like stark and weird?
It's the first time it happened. I think it feels like a device to wrap the movie up quickly. To be like, we need a sub 2-hour movie. Because I think this movie's an hour and 52 minutes with credits or whatever. And so if you don't have her do that, it's probably going to take a little bit longer to end the movie. So instead, because one of my favorite tiny scenes is where they go back to the guy who runs the church, who then is like now wearing a suit. And he's like, this is my fucking bar, and I'm going to need a guy downstairs and I need to own that. And like, he's turned into a completely different guy. Like you need a much bigger amount of time, a fuller scene to like accomplish that without the narration.
Yeah.
And the way she's explaining how you can build the house so quickly, because if you just say money is no object and actually mean it. So I think it just ends things quicker, which is what they're looking for. And then they take them to the new house, and I love like the end where he tells them like, it never happened. He's like, all right, do not tell your mother.
It's kind of crazy though, right? Because he knows that he'd be in deep shit for having. I also I don't like it, but I thought it was a interesting detail that the mom becomes an alcoholic.
She like smokes a shit ton and becomes an alcoholic because she like can't handle it. She's like more social than the dad and she cannot handle this.
Yeah, and she has to be around like her husband and her son like 24 hours a day for the last 35 years. Drives anyone nuts. I also, a few details we missed out in the beginning was how she had a grocery cart in the bunker. So it's like she was going through a grocery store, but it was just their pantry, right? And then she's like wanting the ceiling, and he's like, oh, I love the parallels too. He's like, it's exactly like our house, right? And then it's missing the window frame because you don't need windows in a bunker. I love that detail about it. And then when they're above at the end, he's like, this is no different from the bunker. And then he hits it, and then there's the window pane. Cut to her in a fucking 200-acre field. She's like, oh, this is a lot different. Yeah,
this is different, Calvin.
Yeah.
The ending is pretty perfect to me.
What was he do? What was Christopher Walken doing measuring the yard? Was that a bunker thing I missed in the beginning, or?
I think he was trying to set up the back porch area to put the chairs exactly where they should go.
Oh, I thought he was measuring out to build another bunker out there.
That could have been what the joke was, honestly.
Yeah.
That would be, yeah. She's just like, fuck it, you're not building a bunker. We die. If it happens, we die. We're old. That's it.
Yeah.
I really liked this movie again. It kind of when it started out, I was like, oh, this is only working on sort of a nostalgia level for me. But no, it really sort of ties itself together. And like I said, it's pretty emotional at the end. It's very funny. I think it's less funny maybe on multiple watches, but still, if this is like your first time watching it, I think all the jokes they set up in the beginning pay off. So this is that's a very good movie still.
No, I mean, as a first time watcher, it's so weird because I do feel like at points I have seen this movie. Like either I've seen so many clips of it recently, which makes sense because it's the 25th anniversary, but also the fact that I'm pretty sure I've seen bits and pieces on like cable over the years because I think this is one that showed up on cable quite a bit. And I was like, oh, I know what happens next. And then it's not what I thought. I was like, that's right. I haven't seen this movie. I was just having to keep reminding myself.
Yeah, a lot of it's still like when it came back to me pretty quick, but then a lot of details. I was like, she has a guy with her. Is that it? And I was like, is that a lover or a gay best friend? And then it turned out to be both. But like when it is Dave Foley, and I was like, oh shit, yes. Like now I remember. And I was like, that's like perfect to have him.
Oh yeah, I thought you were saying the gay and the lover were the same person. You're saying you remember one of each, but you couldn't remember if it was this. I gotcha.
It's the late 90s, man. Who knows what happened with Troy?
I gotcha, man. As a first time watcher, I agree with you. I don't think this movie stands on nostalgia alone. I think this is all out like a pretty decent movie that holds its own even after all these years. Like the jokes still land.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched Blasts from the Past.